One of the big things our clients come out the other end with our service is telling us the most valuable thing they got was us telling them what not to buy.
Our motto is buy without regrets, and so
if you can buy a property that will serve you for 10 years as opposed to 3 years, that will serve you well. It's something.
Buying a great property today, that's not just what it's about. It's also getting something that could be ripe for improvement when the time is right for that investor or for the next buyer.
You think about, right, lifestyle, what's important to you? How do you get to work? What do you need for your family? What amenities like parks and shops? Then you look at the budget.
Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. I'm a mortgage broker since 2013. And in this podcast, we're going to be interviewing Australia's leading buyer's agents, ones with decades of experience, have the local insider knowledge on the street, and can really help you with your buying process, no matter whether you're a first home buyer, upgrader, investor. In this podcast, you'll get access to Australia's leading buyer's agents' minds every week on a Thursday. What's the word on the street? Welcome to Street Secrets. I'm Chris Bates. Pretty excited to be doing this episode today because anyone who's followed along to any other episodes that we've done would just see that I love, people who've got a lot of experience, particularly in this domain. It's something that I feel you get better at every year, and it really matters when you're engaging a buyer's agent. And Scott, the first buyer's agent in Brisbane, I believe, Scott McGeever, thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, obviously 1999, I think the business started. I mean, you were as a BA. I mean, different world, right? Probably no one even knew what you did and how you probably even also had to figure it out. But let's just maybe talk it through. Your experience. So obviously it's been so long. What you're doing prior to that, even though it was so long ago, and just the different markets that you've seen in Brisbane over that time, because. That's one of the benefits of experience, right? You just understand how cities evolve and you've seen it go through different cycles.
Yeah, absolutely. I started life as a property valuer in the government. So I was really grounded in, back then we did unimproved capital values. So it was all about land. So that really gave me a good grounding. And then a valuer up until 1998, when I started advising people around buying property and what it was worth, what they could do with it. So a little bit more of an extension to what I was doing, just valuation. And then the story was we got contacted through our valuation practice in 1999 by someone moving from overseas, and they were moving from the States. So they knew what a buyer's agent was. I didn't. And so I looked up what it was and found out what it was, and just ran with it. So they were actually landing in Brisbane in 6 weeks' time. They gave me a brief, and I just hit the road. It took me, pretty much that time because it was a wide brief. They back then in '99 they had $2 million. And we were looking for beachfront property. So it was, it was a lot of fun. So sparked my interest in, obviously, buyer's agency. But then after that, it was brought back down to earth because no one else in Australia knew what it was. So, we had to build from the ground up. And public awareness was a huge thing. So educating people, as you said, that was a massive thing.
Yeah, I think... obviously the US experience there, but looking for a super scarce asset as well, right? So he's like, well, I know this is going to be hard to find. But I mean, that was maybe initially what probably buyer's agent people thought they needed one for, but it's obviously moved more mass market over the last 25 years. But, how have you sort of seen the Brisbane market evolve? I mean, and go through those sort of, in 5 or 10 year chunks just to sort of, how when you reflect on it, and where it is at now in the sort of, particularly last 5 years, right? It's gone to a whole other level, but how have you seen it play out?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this just the other day because, if we go back 30 years ago, I was valuing in 1992 and we had a real little hump then. And Brisbane didn't do a lot until that early 2000s, and then 2003 and 4, it just absolutely took off from where it was, which was, low. And then interest rates went up then, so it tapped out for a little while then, and then so we were buying through all of that period for investors, and we were sticking to our knitting. And what I mean by that is just choosing quality areas and quality properties. And I think that's been our catch cry. For me, we are opportunity identifiers. So we're really good at picking over the market and identifying opportunities for clients. So that then, GFC and then stimulus and took off again here in Brisbane. And then after that, probably 2011, 2012, certainly after the floods, that really killed off the market here for a while. And then we just didn't do anything for the rest of that decade. So COVID came, and rest is history, I suppose. The market, looking back, it's unbelievable. When we were buying properties in, say, Everton Park, and we were buying them for $500,000 in 2017, 18, and then 2021, and they're punching $1 million. And we were scratching our heads, and it's hard for someone that's local to quantify that. Or wow, that's unbelievable. But yeah, hey, we just had to knuckle down and just come to terms with it, really.
Yeah, I mean, we had clients buying in that 2015 to 2018, 19 range. A lot of like you say, around that sort of price point, even a little bit more, and what you could get for your money, and all of a sudden, bang, right? They kind of all doubled, right? The 600s become like 1.3, 1.4, and it's a really hard market. So how do you, and I think in this, I don't really like to talk about too much about where we are right now in the cycle, all that sort of stuff, but just because of the run and what locals sort of are seeing, is it? Do you feel like it's just a sort of bit of a natural affordability curve? Do you just see that the better areas and the real scarce assets will kick on because they're just something X factor about them, and the people in Brisbane that will still want to upgrade within those suburbs? Like, obviously you've got to be quite nervous, and when you're transacting after a big run, because the risk is high, but hence why you've got to be really careful what you buy, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really the key. Stick to quality. A quality asset will always appreciate, or it won't go backwards in a flat market, or when the rest of the market's seeing a downturn. And that's something that we really, took hold of in early days is, okay, can we buy an asset and it can still flatline if the market's going down? So someone could reasonably sell it in any market and still get their money back. And the other measure we used was, okay, well, I'm not going to put my money into it. Well, why would I expect a client to put their money into it? And so that has stood us in good stead over the years, and made sure that assets that we bought for clients increased in value.
Yeah, it's something you can be proud of, right? Like, it's obviously you're trying to get the outcome the client wants, but also you got to make sure put that. You've got the experience, you've got the knowledge, right? You've seen those down markets; they haven't, and they're also wrapped up emotionally going through purchases. It's you need that sort of steady set of hands. I mean, obviously we had floods in the past in Brisbane that, people forget, and then they come back, and then, and also just there's parts of suburbs that, get overlooked in booms, right? How do you sort of, when you think about, inner ring Brisbane, which is what would, where your specialty is, how do you sort of, guide clients on just some of the challenges in different pockets, and, highlighting it that is only X Ks from the city, but it's really held back because of these reasons? Or, how do you sort of make sure the clients get the right, outcome for the right brief?
Yeah, I think the, whether it's an investor or whether it's an owner, ultimately, obviously, an investor doesn't mind. They're really dollar driven, and they want growth, they want return. An owner is a bit more emotional. They want to live there, and they want to live in a nice place and have a good area. So, but the underlying thing I always say to people is you just don't want to make a bad investment decision, because ultimately your home is that tax-free thing moving forward that you want to get really good growth out of. And yeah, obviously you want the pool, or you want the deck, or whatever it may be. So knowing areas, knowing streets, because Brisbane is, a really undulating city. So knowing that you buy on that right side of the street or in the right area, the right aspect, because it does vary dramatically from suburb to suburb, but street to street. And it's one thing that it does get publicised a lot. Obviously, is median prices in suburbs, and you can see suburbs perform really well. But if you buy within a poor position in that suburb, you're just going to get cruelled when everything else is growing, and you're down in the dip with no sunlight and overland flow, and you're wondering, well, I bought in Paddington. This is a great suburb. Why aren't I seeing the growth? So those little things have really come to the fore now, but people just didn't understand that back in the day.
Obviously, the land quality, right, is wrapped up. It's ticks the boxes on a piece of paper, 4 bedrooms and 2 baths in Paddington, let's call it. And but you're right, that's in the bad pocket, right? That was the bad part of the street, and it's the pocket that has got issues with noise or light or floods or whatever. And and I think there's those sort of they seem not much when you're buying in a hot market because everyone's going up and everyone's sort of FOMO. But when things do cool off, those compromises sort of get factored in, and I think you sort of got to have seen it both sides of the coin to be able to have the confidence, like you said there, to have those difficult conversations with the clients. I think you've got a bit of a full circle, right? You've obviously grown a business, and then also now you've sort of, how does that sort of also help you now? Like it's, I'm sure there's times when, time is tight and you can't be on every brief, but, it sounds like it's more on the other side of the coin. You've gone back to and you can get a lot more like one-on-one with clients.
Yeah, it's actually quite fulfilling, because when we started, it was just me and Amanda, my wife, and then we were joined by another lady, and it was easy to be across everything. And as you grow, as public awareness of buyers agents became more prevalent, we took on more clients, and I was across every brief. I was looking at everything, but I wasn't involved actively in searches. So every property we were buying, I saw, but it's obviously hard when you're growing a business and running a business. So I think over that sort of 20-year span, and we've come off it now, and I'm back client facing. So that's really good. People get me. So I work with another lady, Sarah, and it's just us, team of 2, and they get both of us, 2 for the price of 1. So it's really good to be able to be back, a little bit granular and servicing people and helping them buy, because I heard someone the other day saying that they've got a DD checklist, which we did, and I was talking to Sarah the other day, and I actually have that sort of mental thing, that DD mental thing in my head, where I just look at a property and just check off a lot of things, and I can just discard it. So that's a really sort of hard thing for anyone that's been in the industry a short time to be able to do. So we find it, I cut through a heap of property before I even get in the car to go out and have a look at something. So
yeah, absolutely. You've the things that are all the deal breakers that you are going to be deal breakers for other buyers in different buyer pools, and it's great, they love it, but this is going to really hold the price back, and you're not wasting your client time or your client, so you can be really getting yourself on the tools is unbelievably valuable. It's one of the challenges we've had. We've grown the business. It was me doing it all like you. And then, fortunately for me, I had Ben, my business partner, who's just amazing at loans and structuring. And I realized pretty quick he's actually better at that than me and getting loans through banks. And so I could help on more of the guidance on the decision making. But it's really valuable, I think, when you can speak to those ones with the experience. I think and it's been one of the challenges of new to industry buyers agents and buyers agents growing, and you've got someone who's maybe got a bit more experience, but even not that much. It's a real issue, I think, because it's a high-paying service, and it's a real personalised service, and what you're paying for is that value and that risk protection and the knowledge transfer. And you just sometimes it's there's always a pressure in organisations as well sometimes to buy, the commission only models or the bums on seats issue. And I think that's a huge value add to have someone who's been on tracking the market for 30 years. Like you say, know the streets, know the deal breakers. I mean, when you think about the sort of, the Brisbane market, is it sort of, how do you break it up in terms of, the north versus the south, the east versus the west? Like, how do you think about what drives those, let's say those 4 different markets?
Yeah, it's interesting because back in the day when I was doing valuation work, I was traversing the city. In a day, I could be covering, 150 Ks, going back and forth and north and south and east and west. So getting to know it like that was, intimately was, ultimately a fantastic thing, because when we're looking for a client, and I know buyers agents have broken up into, specialists for certain areas, but I suppose my point of difference is I know too much in a way that, I can cover the whole of Brisbane. But it's been an advantage, I would say, Chris, when we're buying or looking in the northern parts of Brisbane, and it just seems to be topping out and getting a little more expensive than, say, similar distance from the city on the south or the west. So we tend to pivot and then start looking in those other areas. And we were looking for a client late last year in Stafford, and that market just really started to march. And then we were looking a bit further in and found a property in Ashgrove for the same money. It was just an absolutely cracking deal. Like I said, it was just an opportunity, and we seized on that. And I think that's really where it's at, is just being able to weigh off different parts of Brisbane and know what appears to be really good value in a really good area. So it's allowed us to really, and when we had a team, obviously we were covering all of those areas, but it's allowed us to, I suppose, float around and really source those opportunities. Yeah,
I think one of the things I think I used to find quite frustrating, and just putting it out there, is I would find that BAs, I buy everywhere and every client, etc. And I would say, well, come on, niche down, like pick a pocket, like own it. And they would often, a lot of new industry buyers agents would probably talk to me and give some advice. I'd be like, that's what I'd be like, come on, just pick that pocket, like I know, and I get it, and get yourself known in that area. And few would do it, and the ones that did do it ended up, obviously would build great businesses. But I feel like you're right. Once you've been doing it for so long, and particularly in Brisbane, it's not as big as Melbourne and Sydney in terms of the amount of land you have to cover. Yes, it's busier, and yes, it's a bigger city. But I think once you maybe got your decades behind you, you can sort of pivot a lot. It's just that at first you might be like, that's not a great strategy, but as you've been doing it for decades, it actually does. And someone who's obviously buying interstate or is moving there, let's say they're a Sydney-sider, they don't know the city. They don't, right? Like they've maybe gone and stayed in a couple of times in around the city, but they don't know. And there's just so much to understand, particularly that sort of family markets, schools and lifestyle and communities and sport and, commuting for work. And so, someone who's got that sort of broader, can show them different offers in part of the cities is really valuable as well. When you think about the sort of the apartment market in Brisbane, has gone on an absolute tear. Surprised me a little bit, to be honest. Obviously, there's two types of apartments: the high density and the scarce good stuff. But when you think about where it is now, like is it what's going to are you really confident around the sort of the next evolution of Brisbane? Obviously, the Olympics and and the overall buzz behind the city. It's gone up so much, but it's still got so much strong fundamentals behind it long term. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, when I was talking before about where we bought all around Brisbane, we were doing that obviously with a broad base of knowledge and looking at different areas and what they were getting. Early on, there were things that the Kill initiated called suburban commercial improvement projects, and they were really beneficial for lots of parts of Brisbane where they extended footpaths and, had outdoor dining, which Brisbane had never had. So they were done around areas with, suburban apartments. So Brisbane went through a period in the 80s and 90s before City Plan, where you could just get an 800 square metre block and bowl over a house and build a six-pack. So a lot of us had that done. So City Plan came in and then everything was, there's heritage protection. So it left those areas where you can't demolish a house with units. And they are in amongst all of these houses that are now having millions spent on them. So digging around and looking at those sort of units in, really good blue chip suburbs, we've done over the years for clients. So that will be, I think, moving forward, they'll be really good investments. I think the Brisbane market as a whole, I still see that, we've got the rubber band can stretch a bit more. I think the values can go a little more without, going over the top. But the thing I think that's happened recently is the slowdown has been great for the Brisbane market. We just couldn't keep pace. So just that coming off has been really beneficial. And yes, more buyers have got in. We were going to open homes beginning of the year where there was 40 groups of people and, there'd be 20 offers within a day. So I think that's just not sustainable. So it had to come back. But I think, I tend to think the Olympics is, it's a bit of a myth. We're going to get dragged along just because of it and the infrastructure and the development that's going to go on. Hopefully the legacy projects, that will be the massive benefit for Brisbane. And yeah, we'll grow up, because I went to, maybe going to Sydney in 2000 and hadn't been there for a few years and went to Sydney and landed and drove in a taxi and thought, wow, this is a major international city now. So I think Brisbane will not be a Sydney, but yeah, we'll grow up. We'll be a major country town.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. It's the mindset shift. It's also the exposure to the world. It's the, it's one of our greatest things of Australia, right? We are desirable for people moving money from all over the world, and making it their home. And they might have never even considered Brisbane, but all of a sudden it's on their TV, and they might. So I think there is a bit of a network. And you're right, the legacy. It's not stadiums in the suburbs. There's roads, there's infrastructure, there's rail, there's new sporting facilities, there's, gentrification of suburbs and development, and there's all these other things that greatest things of Australia, right? We are desirable for people moving money from all over the world, and, making it their home. And they might have never even considered Brisbane, but all of a sudden it's on their TV, and they might. So I think there is a bit of a network. And you're right, the legacy, it's not stadiums in the suburbs. There's roads, there's infrastructure, there's rail, there's new sporting facilities, there's, gentrification of suburbs and development, and there's all these other things that come around it. It's not so much the Olympics per se, it's the getting the city ready for it and ongoing. I always look at the SQM research, and look at the listings in Brisbane. It's a really crazy chart when you look at, when you look at the 2010 to 20 range, the amount of listings and the amount of old stock that was on the market in those, and you had a choice. Yeah, it was 30,000 roughly listings, and it's kind of been at 15,000 now for like 4 or 5 years, right? So half the amount of properties coming onto the market, nothing's sitting on the market. So that shows our desperation in the market. Everyone's just buying everything. And so it must have been a really tricky market to sort of navigate in those years. What were some of the things that you sort of really did is it the relationships with the agents, making sure you went hard on the good stuff and, sometimes had to force clients to be a bit more patient than they wanted to be? How did you sort of navigate that period?
Yeah, definitely making sure people were more patient. It's all part of that education process in the beginning with our clients when we're setting up a brief, just making sure that, we're going to be doing the right thing by them and we will find it. We for every no, we get closer to a yes, and that's the thing we sort of live and die by. That we will find it if it's out there. We don't mind a challenge, but we're not going to take on a brief that is unrealistic. And I think during that period, yes, there was challenges in that sort of 2010 to 20 with so much stock. You had to sort through a lot of stuff to come up with the good stuff, but there was a lot more scope, I suppose, for negotiation. And I think a lot of, the apartments that we were in oversupply, and a lot of people bought those apartments and saw zero growth, like no growth, and in fact went backwards in some instances, in a lot of instances. So, that when COVID hit, a lot of people just took that opportunity to dump those on the market, and they made money out of them. Absolutely. They got the growth. So the longer they held into COVID, the more growth they obviously got.
Yeah, they finally got the growth. It was, 10 plus years in the last few years. And, they got saved by building prices going up, 40, 50 plus %, and a real stock shortage getting built, and complete FOMO in the market with desperation, affordability and investors. And so it was the perfect storm to push up everything. And things change though, right? Budget last couple of weeks ago, it does change the dynamics for new investors, and, and some of those forces that maybe were what drove it up, not due to the genuine scarcity to it, can sometimes unwind. And so if you did get out of those, I think a lot of people got burnt massively in that period, right? They held for 10 years, got nothing, and opportunity cost was enormous versus buying a house in Everton Park versus buying a $500,000 apartment. Two different lives that got created there. When you think about, the Brisbane market sort of pivoting, you mentioned around the development. I think that's a really good learning that a lot of, buyers agents maybe not know. Like they just, you're in the market and you're learning. There's so many things to learn. I think it's a really difficult job, if I'm honest. And development and city planning is something that I feel like over years you start understanding how councils work and the feasibility for developments, etc. And so naturally when prices are higher and once those, the cost of land plus the cost to build, you are going to see an expansion of new builds, not so much maybe apartments, but a lot of, duplexes, mid-rise, and the city's going to have to go on its next journey. How are you sort of factoring that in when you're guiding clients on briefs and saying, well, this is Brisbane, this is how it's going to change over the next coming decades? I know it could happen, but it's unlikely to happen in these areas. How are you doing that?
Yeah, look, we've always looked at either the set and forget house or going to buy a development site where it's low to medium density residential, where there can be apartments or townhouses built. And we are always, when we're looking at those things, doing our own feasibilities to know whether it works or not now, as well as in the future. And that's all upside, right? So any growth that happens from now is upside for the client. So I suppose we pride ourselves on looking at those opportunities because we've got the experience to know what building costs are, what can be done. We know city plan and what can be developed on any one thing. And I think if a client wants something like that, it's just so totally different to a set and forget house. But some of them are just willing to take on that bit more risk. And they don't have to develop it. A buyer doesn't have to develop it. It's someone that comes along, a developer, and they buy the site. So that's happened quite a lot for our clients where we've bought in those LMR areas, and I've seen fantastic growth because the units have increased or townhouses have increased, and all of a sudden the gross realisation on any development is huge. So I think you really have to be, one or the other, have that appetite because there is more risk in buying a development site.
Yeah, you mean absolutely. I think it's just being aware of that. When you are going the home buyer case, it's surrounded by these other options. And if you're buying a development site, how many other development sites are around there, right? Is it really going to get the uplift, or is they going to have a lot of choice? I think I was meant to touch on it before, but the the last 5 years, you said there was not ability to negotiate anywhere near as, say, the previous, say, 10 years. And that makes sense, right? More listings, boom market. But there's a skill to it and an art to negotiate of how far you can push it, right? And, I think that's, I guess if you were just operating in that last sort of 4 or 5 years, you haven't perfected the art of that negotiation skill. And if you are going to a bit more of a softer market, doesn't mean it's going to collapse, but a softer market. But do you feel like this is where those skills are going to come back to the forefront as a good buyer's agent in the Brisbane market? It's going to have that real ability to know how to get the best price and actually get this thing actually secured, rather than just paying the most and just trying to get a deal done fast.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In 2021, there were so few listings. There were so many people in the market, and we missed out on so many properties that we offered on for clients. So, and that was just one of those things, I suppose. We had to then look at going to the top of the valuation range rather than the bottom, and educating people that this was not the market to try and get a bargain. And then, if it was a good quality property, paying the right money or paying a little bit more for it was well worthwhile, because it'll see growth. So I suppose moving forward now with negotiations is, there's massive amounts of people out there that are buyers agents now, probably not understanding all of the different strategies that you need to implement to negotiate something. And no two are the same, I reckon. There's so many strategies you can use, that we use, to benefit our clients. So, and I'd have to say also that one of the big things our clients come out the other end with our service is telling us the most valuable thing they got was us telling them what not to buy. And the reason being is that, they might have just been looking at something, a homeowner looking at a fantastic house, but it was on a main road, and they would have made the biggest mistake buying something like that and paying big money for it. When we take them a few streets back, they still get the 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, and we negotiate a great price for it. And just because we know circumstances surrounding vendor, market, motivations, competition, you name it, the positives, the negatives. And even if it's something that is not suitable for a client, we've always given that feedback to agents so that they know what value may be, or they might have missed a negative, holds back the property.
Yeah, I think this is when the relationships and the agents will because agents they're selling, and in a boom market, I love you, Scott, but I've got someone else, mate, and I haven't got time to chat to you because I've got another place. So and then other markets, they're like, no, I need good buyers. I need people I can trust. I need someone who's not going to fall over, and anyone can sort of buy in those hot markets, I guess, if you've got enough budget. But in those other markets, it's having those real educated buyers, because buyers are a lot more nervous, right? And you've got to give them the confidence to transact and know that, hey, no, don't buy that, but this is actually ticks the box. It's super scarce. It's super desirable. It ticks. There's nothing major compromised about it. Like it's a good asset, and even though it feels scary, it's a fair price for this in this market. And I think that's where it's maybe easier to demonstrate value a little bit. But like you're saying, those other hot markets, it's what you're not buy is the real value add. And you're playing a bit of a trusted advisor role. I think that's a experience thing. I think your confidence level around what you know and what you don't know, and when you can give your opinion is something that you get over years. And I think that's why we particularly in the buyers agency space, value it so much. I feel like it's a job you just got to get the get the runs on the clocks on the speedometer, I guess you'd call it. Scott, it's been a really good chat. Obviously, I feel if someone wants a real personalised, service within the Brisbane market, it's going to be hard to beat, right? It's in terms of working with yourself and your team, and and I think particularly if you're looking at different parts of the city and want someone to sort of guide you on that sort of home buying journey, and particularly over the next period of who knows what's going to happen, but it's getting that real confidence that you're going to be buying a good asset. So thanks so much for coming on.
That's a pleasure. Thanks very much, Chris.
Thanks so much for listening today. We hope you got lots of value out of it. If you'd like to speak to our guest today, there's links in the show notes on how you can get in contact. And if you're buying your first home, upgrading, renovating, or need any finance-related queries, obviously we'd love to help. There's links in the show notes to us as a mortgage broker, and we look forward to next week's episode.